Hello, friends, family, and other people who listen to the podcast. And you're listening to another episode of Certified Forgotten, the podcast that delves into the forgotten and otherwise discarded, usually not appropriately discarded films of Rotten Tomatoes. We're going to talk about some horror films today. It's me, Matt Monagle. I'm one half of your Matts. I'm joined, as always, by my intrepid co-host, the Laurel to my Hardy, I can't think of any other famous toes. It's Matt Donato.
But you had one example? That's literally all you had? Just one?
When I panic, I just say Laurel and Hardy. It's a thing.
I'll be the Tails to your Sonic. That's fine.
Oh, yeah, I watched that movie and liked that movie, so
Yeah.
that's okay.
Relevance. SEO terms.
Yes, yeah, and we are now ranking for Sonic the Hedgehog. The people that find us are going to be super disappointed.
So mad.
So this week, we're going to talk about a film, and I feel like this happens a lot. We're going to talk about a Fantastic Fest film, and that's probably kudos to the programmers at Fantastic Fest and wag of the finger to the distributors here, because a lot of these movies get played at Fantastic Fest and then never really get distributed in the United States in ways that people can easily access them. We'll talk about that in a bit. But Matt, we have another great guest this week who picked this movie especially for us, so I'm going to let you do the introductions.
Yeah, it seems like a recurring theme that we just keep having guests, Matt. It's like we have this planned.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
It's like our thing.
Yes, with us this week, we have my very good friend. She writes for sites such as Slash Film, Fangoria, Vulture, and is just kind of a pinnacle for horror writing on the interwebs. You've seen her writing many places, and her name is Kalyn Corrigan. Kalyn, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Very pleasure. Thank you for driving half an hour over here in LA, which I know is not fun.
Well,
Yeah, that is a real testament to the podcast. You guys have to listen to this whole episode because an hour in LA traffic.
see, now the guilt is laid upon you, and you have to devote yourself because I devoted myself to LA traffic.
You're in this far.
I like the guests that immediately start by badgering the people that are listening. Those are always my favorite guests.
I think it's going to go well from here on out.
It can't get much worse. It can't get worse than what we've done already. So yes, of course, it's only going to get better from here.
You guys haven't even taken the shot yet. So, Kalyn, I want to start by asking you, as we do all of our guests, a little bit about your history in the horror genre, because I think I've followed you on Twitter for like years and years, and I've seen your stuff, but you're not super duper active on Twitter, so I don't feel like I know you as well as some of the other film critics. So talk about kind of like how you got into the genre. Was it as a kid? Was it as a teenager? When did you and horror sort of connect?
Yeah, I guess I just had like a very strange, very stressful first couple of years. And, when I was growing up, like my dad was always really sick. So I spent like a lot of time in the hospital when I was really young. And then he eventually passed away when I was 11. And it was after like a string of a lot of very stressful surgeries, like heart transplant and pancreas transplant and having like his toes amputated from infection because he had juvenile diabetes, and it weakens your immune system and then it just kind of like attacks your whole body. But it was just such a weird experience, and it was something that like I didn't really know how to relate to anybody around me, especially like growing up in a place like Plano, Texas, where everything is very traditional and conservative, and there's not like a ton of people that might be able to relate to this really random circumstance. And I kind of came to horror like to feel, I guess in some ways it made me feel like less alone. There was these filmmakers that were making these really outlandish and wild movies, and I guess some of the times it seemed like maybe they themselves were wrestling with some sort of demons that they were working through on screen. And not that you have to have like trauma to be a horror filmmaker or to enjoy horror films. I think anybody can enjoy horror films on their own terms, but it was something that I guess made me feel a little bit less alone in the middle of Plano, Texas, dealing with these really strange and weird circumstances. And also just the thought of like how cathartic horror films can be. I watched a lot of like horror heroes, I guess, and like Final Girls and what have you, that would go through these really traumatic experiences and such tragedy and come out on the other side, and maybe not come out unscathed, but come out regardless of what they had been through. And like the survival of it was something that was very cathartic for me watching that.
Yeah, I think the horror genre is very good at, depicting these heroes that, as you just said, they don't always come out peachy keen and, clean. And the horror genre allows for the nastiness to happen. but that's also real life. And it's like one of those genres that just understands that. It just understands the fact that like there's no Hollywood ending, to quote Anna in the Apocalypse. Like literally, like you're seeing something on screen in most of these films that is not like reality. And oddly enough, the horror genre is one of the genres that just understands that most, given the fact that it's about such maybe out of bounds and ridiculous things.
I was going to ask, talking about the connection you had both to the themes of the films and sort of the filmmakers themselves, the people that were working through stuff. When did you start to feel like you had a sense of community as well? When did you feel like you were building out a connection of like-minded film fans, either in person or digitally?
Yeah, I think that happened when I was in college because it kind of took me a while to catch up with myself, I guess. It was something that I looked back on and started to notice a pattern. Like, oh yeah, I'm that person that it's Valentine's Day and I say to my friends, well, why don't we go see My Bloody Valentine 3D in theaters? Or it's St. Patrick's Day and I'm the one in the friend group saying, well, why don't we go to the haunted house over here that's St. Patrick's themed? And then when I was in college, like my boyfriend at the time was like, you know, you really like horror movies. And I was like, oh, you're right, I do, don't I? I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna dive deeper into that and like actively seek out horror films. And he was like, yeah, go for it. And I was like, all right, yeah. And I just like got very immersed in the horror community and seeking out specific directors that I really liked watching, and then turning to social media, I guess, as a way to find more people that were like me. Because again, I was still living in Texas at the time, so I knew a few people around me that liked horror movies, but maybe weren't quite as like obsessive about it as I was. So it was something that I actually would find friends on Twitter that we could talk about horror movies. And then after I moved out to California, I actually befriended some of those people in real life. And now we like hang out and watch movies all the time.
Yeah, that took me until like after college. Like I got through high school and college of people just looking at me going like, why do you watch these terrible things? You know, my parents 100% not understanding, my friends in high school not understanding. And even in college when I started to have my own, as you said before, like, you know, you have your own personal discovery first. That was college. And I still never met my core group until like after college. So like, it's always funny to hear everyone else's experiences and mine being like such like a late bloomer. I realize how long it took for me to actually get into horror versus most other people in like our circles and stuff like that.
Totally. Yeah. Cause I didn't have those parents that were really into horror movies growing up. Like my dad was pretty into movies, but we weren't super close. And just because he was going through so much all the time, it was hard for us to be close. And, but he definitely like showed me like West Side Story and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I remember that, and that was cool. But he and my mom weren't really like cinephiles as much. My dad liked to read a lot. He liked to read a lot of Stephen King, but yeah, horror movies were something that I had to kind of come to on my own and work through on my own until I found everything that I was looking for.
So one of the things I find interesting when I talk to people about horror, I feel like the movies that get you into the genre are formative, right? But they, over time, you kind of rebuild your own canon. Like you parse through everything that you've ever seen, and you're like, oh, these were really the movies that meant something to me. So kind of looking at it through that lens, what were some of those films for you? What would you know, if you were doing one of those Twitter things where you're like, oh, what 5 horror movies would you have to know to get me? Like, what are those titles for you?
I guess I'm very into witches and period pieces and honestly good wallpaper. Like your movie can be not spectacular, but if you've got some great wallpaper in a spooky house, I'm kind of halfway there. I'll meet you halfway. So I think the 5 horror movies to get to know me.
It can be 3 or 2. It can just be, yeah. I'm not gonna make you do 5.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, like definitely The Witch by Robert Eggers, because that not only is a film that I think was executed so beautifully, and I love Robert Eggers as a filmmaker so much. He really speaks to me, and his dedication to detail, like the fact that everybody on The Witch had their clothes hand sewn because that's how it would have been done during the time period. It just gives it this level of authenticity that I really appreciate. And it's like a witch movie that I was wanting for so long. I really wanted somebody to make that movie, and then it was like he came along and was like, here you go, Kalyn.
So he made that for you,
He
essentially.
did.
Okay, yeah, okay.
He told me.
Just checking.
He gave me a little heads up. He called me. But yeah, The Witch, and I have to say Wicker Man, very much along the same vibes. so obviously, like, I love Midsommar. I wouldn't say you need to see Midsommar to get to know me, but that I do like it because I'm so into The Wicker Man and that kind of like pagan folklore horror.
And just for the record, which version of the Wicker Man? Because I know people will wonder.
Oh,
The Cage version, obviously, right? Yeah,
Is it the
it's
Cage
of
version? I
course.
thought it was the
I
Cage
just want to see
version.
Cage in a bear costume punching women in the face. That's exactly what I'm going for.
That's the moment that we need right now. Is a culture.
Yeah, of course.
More of that.
More
That's
of that,
really-
please.
That would definitely solve things. Yeah, no, the original Wicker Man with Christopher Lee, my dude. Yeah. In fact, I would say I have to put Horror of Dracula on there because Christopher Lee is my Dracula. I have every movie that he was ever in as Dracula at my house. I've even like written an article arguing why he's the best Dracula for Birth Movies Death. He just has this air of importance when he walks into a room, and I really dig it. He's a total boss.
So when Robert Eggers makes his Nosferatu, that's going to be your favorite movie ever, right?
I'm gonna freak out.
Yeah,
I'll probably
okay.
just
I'm just
spontaneously combust.
just checking on that. Yeah.
And I think also Taxi Driver. That's definitely I know it's not technically a horror film, but it's so
It's really more of elevated horror, I think, is what we would describe it as today.
I'm going to cancel this podcast just because of that.
Sorry, I got to take a shot. I did it.
Yep. Drinking game, go.
Oh no. No, but it definitely like speaks to the kind of horror that I like. That deep dive on a character and just someone slowly unraveling over the course of a film, and just a ticking time bomb, and just morphing into something that is less human and more monster. So, like Old Boy, I love just watching people disintegrate. So, yeah, there's a couple of films. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I was going to say the minute Matt asked that question, I immediately in my head thought of The Witch, and like I knew your whole type already. Like, so yeah, you wear it well, especially in tattoo form as well.
Yes, I have a little goat.
I like that.
He's very spooky.
Moist spooky.
Yeah, he's just a happy little satanic goat.
Yeah, happy little grinning satanic goat. As most goats are.
We got goats and we got pizzas. We got interesting tattoos on the other side of this line.
Absolutely, we're representing. Where's yours, Monocle?
I can't decide. That's a whole other thing. I've gone through so many versions. You can't. It's might be my first tattoo. I can't just do like whatever the random is at Fantastic Fest.
I mean,
That feels like a cop out.
again, pizza scream face was my first tattoo, Matt. You could do it.
We already have enough trouble separating ourselves.
This is
So
true. That's
I
right.
have-
I'm the bad boy, Matt, with the tattoo. That's how we have to
Wow.
do this.
Okay, so
I guess that makes me like the put together older brother.
You're the dad.
All right. Oh yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm curious too. As you're, I'm gonna go right into more questions because I'm done with you, Matt. Kalyn, is you're finding stuff now, and I know that you write about a lot of different horror films at like every different level of the genre, big budget, low budget, super independent. Where do you find yourself going to for recommendations? Like, where is stuff coming to you that's getting you the most excited? Is it the festival scene? Is it relationships with programmers? Like, where are you tapping into stuff?
yeah, the festival scene is very helpful. I love Fantastic Fest so much because I feel like there's so many films there that I haven't seen anywhere else, or I wouldn't have ever come to if it wasn't just a random screening that I signed up for, not knowing anything about the movie and just walking into while I was at the festival. And I found so many gems that way. Like Boardman is a film that I don't know if I would have ever seen if I had not been to Fantastic Fest and just said, sure, I don't know what this is, but I'll give it a go. And now I think it's terrific and very creepy. And in a weird way, I almost want to recommend it to people who dig Parasite because I think there's some similar themes at work there. But yeah, aside from festivals, I guess there's just like a list of set filmmakers in my mind that if their name comes up and it says they're working on something, like Robert Eggers or Ari Aster or Ben Wheatley, Mike Flanagan, Cary Fukunaga, Karin Kusama, Jeremy Saulnier, Brian De Palma, obviously, then I will just be like, oh, yes, I will watch this. Like, it doesn't matter what the trailer looks like, like whatever Jennifer Kent's next movie is going to be, I'm going to be there because I know that that's a filmmaker that I trust their style and I'm very interested in the stories that they have to tell. So that's something that I usually look out for. And I don't know if he has it anymore, but for a while, Ben Wheatley, I found like a secret little Tumblr page where he would just like post little ideas that he had and things. I don't know if too many people found out and he got rid of it because I haven't been able to find it lately.
Really?
But sometimes if you dig, you can find like little things that filmmakers make on the side.
I love Wheatley, and I had no idea about that. And like, is it still existing in its old form, or he just doesn't post on it?
I was looking for it the other day and I was like, it's not here. I don't know if he just like, because sometimes he'll just up and delete everything on his Instagram, I've noticed. So,
I mean, smart again.
yeah,
But like,
because he's probably like, oh, I should hide my ideas.
oh, I would love to just get into every little nook and cranny of his brain if he was posting it somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm actually pissed I didn't see that.
It was like some random name. It was like Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And then I just like found it one day when I was on a rabbit hole in Tumblr and I was like, wait a second, this looks like pictures from the set of In a Field in England. Like what's going on here? And then I realized it was like him.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Wasn't he supposed to be working on like there was a underground mutant like Soldiers versus Monsters movie that he was allegedly in production on for a while, and I don't know.
That was teased years ago, wasn't it? That was recent.
That was like 2-3 years ago at this point.
Yeah, I don't know if that's ever gonna happen. I mean, I'm all here for him doing his own version of The Descent or whatever, but like, I don't think we're ever gonna get that.
That would be nice.
That's too bad.
I would love to see it. What he's doing the next like Tomb Raider or something, right? Isn't he?
He's doing Rebecca right now.
Oh, he's doing Rebecca. Yes, he's doing Rebecca right now.
I think he just finished filming that.
Mm-hmm.
So the remake of Hitchcock's Rebecca, which I love Ben Wheatley so much, but that is like maybe my favorite Hitchcock film, and I just, good luck. Like, I don't know who could outdo that.
The bar to meet is already up here, sir. You must jump that. And not even Olympic pole vaulters can do that.
Yeah, we'll see. I never want to judge a movie until it's out, but I was just like, oh, really? You picked that one? Oh, okay.
That is certainly a stretch. Okay.
Well, I think we've talked about Fantastic Fest a lot, so I sort of feel like that's a natural segue into today's film. So, Donato, are you ready to start talking about Rattle the Cage?
I am. I just finished watching it, 30 minutes ago? So, fresh in my mind.
Excellent. All right, so we're going to throw away for just a second, and when we come back, it's all about Rattle the Cage. Here to talk about a 2016, did I get that right? 2015 film out of the United Arab Emirates, which was billed when it was released as the first thriller / mystery horror type movie to be released by that as a country. So the name of the film is Rattle the Cage. It is directed by Majid Ansari, and it stars two very famous Palestinian actors, Ali Suleiman and Salih Bakri. And it's it was described in the original Fantastic Fest program as a throwback to early 90s small town thrillers, stuff like, Red Rock West. I think I butchered that name. But it is a film about a drifter who ends up in a small town. He gets in a brawl with somebody at a local bar and is thrown in jail overnight. And while he is in jail, the kind of local constable, the bumbling police officer, is murdered by somebody pretending to be another police officer who has a nefarious plan involving that police station and the main character as a prisoner that doesn't really come to light until the end of the film. And much of this is really a back and forth between the main character, who never leaves his prison, and the police officer. The original Fantastic Fest program described the two of them, and this is just to give you a flavor of what you're missing. The main guy is kind of a little bit of an Eric Roberts type, and the bad guy is a bit of a Dennis Hopper type. And if those two names do anything for you, this is a film that you definitely want to check out. So Rattle the Cage is now available on Netflix, but it did hit our criteria. It did have 5 or less reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, so we get to talk about it today. And first and foremost, I want to ask Kalyn, this was your pick, this was your recommendation. How did you encounter this film? Was it at Fantastic Fest?
It was, yeah. It was just one of those random Tuesday morning screenings that they're like, hey, this movie is playing and it's the first genre film to come out of the United Arab Emirates, and anybody who wants to come see it. I mean, I was looking around for what to see, and I thought that was an interesting point because I thought about it and I was like, yeah, that's true. I've never seen any other genre films come out of there, and I feel like I've seen so many films from so many different countries now, going to places like Fantastic Fest and Beyond Fest and Fantasia, and so I wanted to check it out, and I'd heard a few good things as well. And I went and saw it, and I was just kind of blown away. I was like, this is a first-time filmmaker coming out of a part of the world where not a lot of genre films have even been released. Not even a lot of films at that point had been released. And he just made something that was so confident and exciting and intense. And I just really wanted to see it take off and like explode and have like 1 million screenings across America and everybody fall in love with it. And I was like a little sad when that didn't happen. And I'm still kind of trying to figure out why that didn't happen. So, but we can get into that in a little bit.
That is the point of this podcast almost. Yeah. That is the last thing we always end on. Why? Why did this not happen? And the answer is always usually distribution, word of mouth, stuff like that. But yeah, agreed. I mean, the Fantastic Fest morning slots are always such a, not crapshoot, just like a random assembly of all the films that just don't really have a place. So I like the fact that you can just take that early morning 11 a.m. slot, look at it and be like, all right, here's 5 films. I have no idea what they're about. I have no idea where they're from, and these titles mean nothing to me. So yes, let's just pick one. I found a lot the same way you found Rattle Cage. I think that's how I found like Shrew's Nest and stuff like that. So that does happen to be a very good way of finding new films.
Yeah.
I want to ask both of you, because Kalyn, you mentioned this just a second ago. The film, when it came out, was very much like, hey, we're the first UAE horror or thriller to be released. And to me, when I saw that was a huge selling point. And I've been thinking about it for the last couple of days. Like, what is it about horror as a genre? What is it about us as horror fans? I feel like, because film itself is a broad thing, and like a lot of countries will release movies, they'll have their own film industry, whether it's small or big, it doesn't matter. But you can usually pinpoint that first horror film. Usually, as a national cinema is kind of like spinning up its gears, it's going to be a bit or a minute before it gets around to making a horror film. So I'm kind of curious, like, what is that hook? Like, why do we, the three of us and everyone else, get so excited when you read something and it's like, this is Cuba's first horror film, or this is Vietnam's first horror film? And I'm like, hell yeah, I'm into this.
Yeah, I think it's a few things. I think it's partially that the horror community is a pretty open and welcoming community. And I think we're always just excited to have more people join our little community. So when we see that somebody from another part of the world, that maybe that kid grew up feeling like there wasn't a lot of horror fans around him or her, and then they made their own horror film, and then they came and joined us, and we all were happy together celebrating this little weird genre that we love. And also just like, I'm always excited to explore new films from other countries, especially because I don't get to travel as much as I would like to, because traveling is very expensive. I hope to one day travel to all the countries around the world. But in the meantime, I feel like movies can kind of be a way for me to experience other cultures and learn about other parts of the world that I don't know as much about. And because I already know that I like horror movies, if there's something coming out of like Japan or South Korea or Berlin and it's a horror film, it's kind of like a 2 for 2 for me. It's like, oh, I can watch something that I'm probably gonna like because I like the genre already, and then I can also like learn a little bit more about this country while I'm watching it.
Yeah, I think for me it's the culture thing too, because specifically, we watch a lot of American horror, obviously, because we live in America, and every country falls into its types, and every country, we have the Wanverse, James Wan's movies going on right now, and that has kind of dictated how horror has went stateside. But then you get somewhere like the United Arab Emirates, something Israel, Cuba, like Juan of the Dead coming from Cuba, and Big Bad Wolves from Israel, and you get these things that are very unique to the region and very unique to the voices of these filmmakers that are so different from what we're used to. And for me, that gets exciting because, for all of us, we're watching a lot of movies. We're watching whatever comes out, usually in the horror genre, and we're trying to keep up. And when you get that variety and that differential, ability to differentiate, that is just exciting to me. So yeah, I'm always looking for international features to, as Kalyn said, I don't get to travel that much, open up their culture, open up their borders to us, and cinema is a good way to do that. And especially spooky cinema, because it's fun.
Yeah, I've always had a pet theory, and I've seen this voiced in other places too. But for me, I feel like watching international horror is more rewarding a lot of the time because I'm not necessarily focusing on the dialogue because it's words on a screen. I really get to spend more time looking at the physicality of the performances. I get to spend more time, noticing filmic elements, cinematography in ways that I wouldn't necessarily because I'm listening so intently to what's being said. It kind of like it emphasizes the visual, de-emphasizes the audio a little bit, obviously, not a lot. But that just puts me in the right space for horror, which tends to be a very visual genre. It's like the perfect mishmash of focusing and providing what I want in terms of horror movies, and it makes something like Rattle the Cage, which has so many big things going on in it, just the right movie for me. Like if you release this film, everything else but all the lines were in English, I think I'd have a harder time enjoying it because so much of this movie I was spent just watching the performance, watching Ali Suleiman's like larger than life cop role, or watching the camera as it moves around and does all these wide swoops and stuff. It just engages me so much more visually because I have to read, I have to look in a way that I don't necessarily have to with American horror.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you say that because I do feel like, in a lot of ways, us horror fans, whether or not we mean to, we're a little bit more accepting of certain performances in foreign films. Like if it's an Italian giallo or if it's something like an Asian horror film, we're more accepting of maybe behaviors that we wouldn't necessarily recognize in ourselves. But we're like, oh, well, it's okay because it's an Italian giallo film. Like I expected them to go big and, wild with their reactions to things. But if we see it in an American horror film, we think, well, I wouldn't do that, so that doesn't make sense. So it's
Right.
it's a little bit more appealing sometimes to watch something from another country and just kind of like let those walls down and just let the movie breathe.
Yeah, we can take that step back further than we usually can from a movie, where we're always taking a step back from a film and watching it from afar, but from international especially, it's not something we see every day. It's not something we know, and yeah, I think there is more of an acceptance to like, okay, I can buy this because I don't know 100% myself.
And reading some of the interviews with Majid Ansari, the director, and it's funny because on paper, for a certain type of film, a lot of the touch points that he was referencing might seem a little, like overdone or exhausting at this point. Because he was talking about who influenced him as a filmmaker growing up, and he named two famous South Korean directors, Park Chan-wook and Bong Joon-ho. He named Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez, and he, which to me that implies a lot of like genre fluidity. It implies a lot of kind of blend of humor and seriousness that's definitely present in this film. And I was like, if you just took those elements and again had it local, it made everything else familiar to me. I think I would focus more on what I didn't like. But because this film introduces so much about culture and so much about family in ways that I'm not used to thinking of as an American, it really allowed me to kind of enjoy those kind of bigger, broader moments, the way that he plays with genre, like a dance number in the middle of the film. All of those things were just so interesting to me in a way they might not have been if somebody here was like, I'm doing Robert Rodriguez. I'm like, well, we already have a Robert Rodriguez. Thanks for, and I don't like him that much anyway, so thanks for playing.
We don't need another one of those. But I mean, it's so funny that you say that too, because obviously one of the things I've written down in my notes is, oh my God, this guy loves Tarantino and Rodriguez. Like that, I literally had that written down before you even said that. He was mentioning it in interviews. So it really translates on the screen. And it's also funny just to see how much American filmmakers influenced other people, and like it picks up on all these different nationalities, and it's fun to see their take on it because exactly what you just said, so many American directors over and over again do the sequence. This was a Reservoir Dogs tag that you're saying before, the dance number in the jail in Rattle the Cage. It's straight from Reservoir Dogs. It's straight awesome, and it works because we're hearing different music from a different place and we're seeing different characters from a different place doing it, where I've seen that same beat in how many other American films, and you're kind of like, all right, so you're just trying here to do the same thing. Like just even a movie like Troop Zero, which is about Girl Scouts and like a good girl gang flick, doing like a Reservoir Dogs thing, and I'm like, all right, I'm getting a little tired of this. And yeah, I watch Rattle the Cage and I can see the Tarantino-ness of the character design and the eccentric details of it and the dance number and go, oh, but I like the way he's doing it. It's such a funny thing to think about. Yeah.
Yeah, and I could also see him as somebody who was growing up somewhere where there's not a lot of filmmakers to look to, looking at
Right.
Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino and saying, well, they did it. Like they didn't come from big money. They just, made little scripts when they could, wrote scripts and made movies and got their own crew together and they made it happen. And maybe I can make it happen.
The renegades, the outcasts. That's what translates overseas, or anywhere really. Not even
There's so much in the visuals that I want to talk about with this. So I wanted to distill it down to just that opening shot, because I think it's one of these films where if you watch the opening shot and you're like here for this, you're gonna have a great time. The movie basically lets, kind of like pulls up its sleeve and lets you see its heart in the first 30 seconds as they do this long, prolonged pan back from his eye when he's in the jail cell, and it pulls through the keyhole and it pulls across the desk and across the furniture and circles around and lands on the keys of the jailer as he's walking into the jail cell. It's so flashy, and it's so the antithesis of what I think of as like low end indie horror kind of things. I think of a lot of like, if your camera has to move, it's more expensive, so you're probably not going to do that. So talk to me about the visuals of the films and use kind of that opening scene as a jump off point.
Yeah, I like how much the camera moves in this movie, because I feel like, especially at the time that this movie came out in around 2015, we were seeing a lot of very slow burn, long establishing shots, long takes of characters being pensive and reflective, and then maybe like a big bang at the end. I think that might have been a result of Ty West being so popular. Films like House of the Devil being so influential in the way that indie filmmakers were making their films. And then here comes this guy that's like, no, I'm not going to leave my camera on a tripod in the corner. I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to dance with it. I'm going to, it's going to do big swoops, and it's going to spin in the air. It's going to follow a character around and do a close-up shot and then pull away into a bird's eye view. And it was really refreshing for me to see somebody be so confident and so alive with his movie. And I think it really adds to the intensity and the electricity of the film, and it really helps with the fact that it's all set in one location.
I want to jump on that real quick, if you don't mind, Donato.
Yeah, go.
I think one of the things to that point too is that I really like about it is, we've seen a lot of like static camera, but we've also seen increasingly over the last few years, like everybody's like, you're gonna do a one take, I'm gonna do a one take. You think that's a one take? Fuck you. This is a one take. Or like they have these extended scenes that play out all in one shot, and it's sort of like a filmmaker flexing their muscles and showing like, look at me and look what I can do. And there are some pretty long takes in this film, but it's never about like, look at this take, like look at how long we're able to do this. It's more about movement, and it's more about dance, honestly. It's about playing with the space. It's about showing objects in motion. And I never got, as I was watching these scenes unfold, I never felt like I was watching somebody just leaving the camera on to show how long they can leave the camera on. It was all about like, enjoying the space, playing with the mentality and the mindset of these characters. And it's a very different approach to long takes than I think I'd seen in a while. It used to be a lot more of that, but in horror, particularly in genre stuff, I don't feel like I've seen this approach a lot over the last few years.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I think Kalyn said this already, but it helps make the jail cell seem that much bigger because this is a single location film. It's all set in, I guess it's like a precinct and jail cell, but again, we're talking about one in the Arab Emirates, so it's not a very, very high-tech one, we'll say. It's basically just some walls and some bars. But even the shot, there's another long take that goes right along the lines with the introductory one, where our hero, or we'll call him basically our prisoner that is trapped in the jail cell, he looks up and he sees the smoke alarm. And there's a very easy way to tell. He realizes if he can trigger the smoke alarm, then the sprinkler system will go off and blah, blah, blah. Like, hopefully something will come from it. And you could easily do a shot where he looks at the smoke alarm and then he looks at the sprinkler somewhere farther away, and that's it. You've now conveyed what we need to know, and that's fine. But the camera goes up through the smoke alarm, past all the wiring, past the microchips and stuff like that make it work, and then tracks all the way through the pipeline to the sprinkler and comes out the sprinkler faucet. And it's just such an intriguing and interesting way of getting from point A to point B, but escaping the room itself that we've now been in for however many minutes at that point. We're halfway through the film at that point, and we know the surroundings, and it's a way to introduce more landscape and in a way that we wouldn't think of in that kind of scenario.
Yeah, because it's a very basic premise. It's just a recovering alcoholic wakes up in a jail cell. A guy comes in, shoots the sheriff, says he's the cop, and just plays mind games with our prisoner from that point out. And that's something that could get very dull very quickly. Just one location, one man holding another man in a jail cell for 90 minutes. And I think with a lesser filmmaker, it might have come across a little bit more drab, but it's actually very taut and intense the entire way through. And I do think the camera movements help with that.
Yeah, because again, how many times have we seen a character study in indie horror that's between two characters just talking the whole time and it goes nowhere? It does nothing, and you sit there going, okay, I understand you tried something for the low budget, you've done what you had to do, but not every filmmaker has that same kind of eye. And what Rattle the Cage does phenomenally well, as we have just said, is tell a story through visuals and also the characters and everything in one. It feels like a cohesive film where all the fundamental parts of it are working together beyond the way it should.
So you mentioned performances and actors. Can we talk about Ali Suleiman as Devon? Because the show is basically his.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love his Jim Carrey and Cable Guy vibes. Just like this very dark comedian that's just come to mess with people. Like, not even necessarily has a plan, not even necessarily wants to kill you, just really wants to make life unpleasant for you in a very fun way for him, for as long as he has you in his grasp.
So the performance of Mr. Crazy Cop, who's not really a cop, who I love very dearly, is the most Tarantino shit I've seen in a long time. And I mean that in a very, very good way. Because the way that the film pens a psychopath, it doesn't stop. Like, I feel like every single scene it gets worse and worse somehow, in the way that even little dialogue beats work, where you have Debon, I guess am I pronouncing that correctly? Okay. So the way that Debon is just talking to Talal, and the way he's saying things that are so menacing when he's not even talking to Talal, and saying things like, there's one sequence where another deputy comes in, and Talal knows this guy's probably going to kill this other deputy if he does anything wrong, or he probably will anyway, and he doesn't really know. And the way that Devon is just talking to him like, oh, you have a wife and kids at home, right? Like, oh, that's a really nice shotgun in the back of your car. Can we go look at it? And it's such a great way of making a scene more threatening and menacing by not doing anything out of the normal. It's just little dialogue beats, and that is so well done by Mr. Ali Suleiman. And also the way that he just loses himself in some scenes, like when he jumps on the cage and he's just perched on it like a monkey in a zoo, and he's just staring through Talal. He's staring right through him. It's some really great character work. It's some top-notch character work, honestly. I was not expecting this from anyone in the film, and the way that he gets that kind of, go back to Tarantino, and the way he gets those little Michael Madsen kind of quirks in his prime, amazing. I feel like I'm always quoting Michael Madsen on his podcast because we're always talking about someone that's deranged and off-hinged. And again, he does the dance number just like Madsen in Reservoir Dogs, but he does that really well.
Yeah, I love a villain that has a code that's very appealing to me, like somebody who might be a bad guy but might be against cursing, or, kind of along the lines of the mayor in Buffy the Vampire Slayer season 3, John Wilkins III. He's a guy that is killing teenage girls, but he's also somebody that reminds you to wash your hands and not get dirt caught under your fingernails. And I've always been really drawn to villains like that are kind of polite, as menacing as they are. And I feel like Debon just is really my bread and butter when it comes to bad guys.
Yeah, because he's the whole time just looking at Talal saying, just cooperate and you're going to get through this and everything's going to be fine. Yes, I'm going to bring your wife into the scenario. Yes, I'm going to bring your kid into the scenario. But if you behave, all of this is going to go over so nicely for you. And it's the way he can flip being mild-mannered and technically good-natured to Talal. And the way he's, let's just be friends. Don't worry about this. Straight face, smiling, happy. And then he's stabbing people and then he's shooting people. And he flips that switch like
Yeah.
with such a nuclear reaction.
Yeah, because when people walk into the room that don't know what's going on, he turns on Mr. Nice Guy act, and he is very cordial and he's very professional, and he quickly convinces them that the prisoner is, an insane person, and they just believe him because that's the guy behind bars, and they just assume, well, of course the bad guy is the one that's behind bars, and the good guy's in the uniform. Naturally, that's how this is supposed to go, right? And the way that he toys with them and toys with Talal, but then the one thing that draws him away from being the worst he could possibly be is that moment when he is about to make things so much worse, and Talal just says, a man wouldn't go against his word, and it like stops Debon in his tracks. It's like that code still applies to him as crazy as he is. There's still like something inside of him that has to adhere to these certain rules.
Which is even more psychotic, which is great because it's like the next step of the psychotic breakdown or the psychotic mentality here, because this is a person who is willing to do anything in this scenario and has shown he will stab you in the throat and then take the dagger and shove it through your ear into your brain and laugh as he's doing it. He will do that, but then he will stop because he goes, all right, like I have a code. It's like, all right, this is just crazy. You've gone off the left field, whatever you want to call it. It's a very well done arc.
Yeah, and I'm honestly kicking myself right now for not making the Jim Carrey connection, Kalyn. That's so spot on because I like this movie. I think this movie is a lot of fun. I'm gonna spoil the ending by being like, I recommend it. Everyone should go see it. It's on Netflix, so you have no excuse not to. But there is a scene in this film that is just like top of the year for me in terms of scenes that I see in a movie. And that's when Debon realizes that all he has to do is hit redial on the phone to figure out, who Talal called. And he goes through this elaborate scientific deduction thing. And in the very end, he goes, science prevails. And it's the most Jim Carrey moment I think I've ever seen from an actor, with the physicality, with the big arms and the way he gets into it. And I was just like, oh, why hasn't somebody tapped into that before? Like, why hasn't, we've seen Cable Guy and things like that, but we've never seen anybody be like, what if we took Jim Carrey and really, really, really made him everything that people love about him in comedy, made him a horror character? And I think they do a really good job with that. I think that's where they hit here.
Yeah, there's, a very thin line between horror and comedy, and I think that's why they can overlap so well together sometimes. And I feel like this movie's a perfect example of just getting a character that, if you didn't know about the things he does behind closed doors, you might actually like him. He's actually like a guy that you might get a beer with, but take that energy and turn it to 11 and give it a psychotic edge, and it's the most terrifying villain you could imagine.
And I mean, that plays right into Ada's character, the other officer or deputy that is working at the station and is not in that room that we are locked in with Debon. And Debon keeps calling her in, and he is, to her face, schmoozing her. He, to her face, is winning her over with just suave charisma. He is playing right into her hand. He's complimenting her little homemade inhaler holder and stuff like that. And he knows how to work those angles. He knows how to manipulate a person and win them over immediately. Then she leaves the room and he's calling her Miss Piggy and making derogatory remarks and stuff like that. So it is so good the way he's able. Again, I just keep going back to the flip switch. He is so good by turning it on and turning it off and just keeping you in that same unsettled sense of, I don't know where this is going to go. He's being very nice right now, but when is that going to change again?
Yeah, and I know this is a strange, a bit of an off recommendation, but honestly, I was so happy when I checked out the new Sonic and saw Jim Carrey in that movie, because it was such a return to form of his like early 90s comedy, and I was so delighted to see him that way again, even though I enjoy his dramatic work too. I was just like, oh yay, he's back. It was very nice. So I almost want to say, if you like this movie, go see Sonic. I was surprised. I really dug it, and I was very happy to see like.
Definitely don't bring the kids to Rattle the Cage. Yeah, leave the kids out of Rattle the Cage, but definitely see Sonic still too, though.
Yeah, you watch.
This podcast brought to you by Sonic the Hedgehog, now in theaters everywhere.
I miss Jim Carrey.
I know, and again, you making that connection, I don't know how I didn't do that. Like it is spot on. Yeah. It's perfect. That's perfect. Exactly explaining his character the whole way.
Well, let me ask you guys about kind of the way that storytelling and set design intersect in this, because it has, it sounds a little maybe derivative to put it this way, but it has that really good escape room logic to it, right? Where like every item in that room has a purpose and a meaning, from the smoke detectors to a faulty walkie-talkie to a coin in a drawer. Like everything in the film has a narrative purpose. And I think part of the fun of Rattle the Cage is watching how all of those different pieces resurface in the final act, and like how everything kind of combines to allow, allow not the good guy to win, but allow there to be a happy resolution for everybody who's an innocent. I'll put it that way. What do you guys think of the way that they use items and the way they use set design in order to drive the story?
I would definitely like to point out, I mean, I think there's a lot of foreshadowing in the film, but one thing that I enjoyed when I rewatched this the other day was when you first walk in, when you're first in the room and Devon walks into the room for the first time, the sheriff is sleeping on the job and he's got his hat over his eyes. And then, after the sheriff is out of the picture and Devon is in there with Yasa, like, was winning her over and swooning over her, and he's getting her to dance with him, he takes her hat and puts it over her eyes. And so it's almost like it goes from a guy, sleeping on the job to a woman asleep at the wheel, and both of them just not being privy to what's around them because they're just not paying attention.
And again, you don't know what he's going to do because he's already killed the one person from that scenario. So then, again, you connect the characters now and you say, okay, this is another innocent who's about to get offed. And, maybe she does and maybe she doesn't in that scenario. We'll get into spoilers, I'm sure, briefly. But yeah, it's a great way of using visual cues to make you remember something that was horrible and then have that come up and go, wait, is that going to happen again? And then the tension starts to build. And then all of a sudden he has the gun. And then all of a sudden we're in another scenario where, okay, there could be a dead body here, but is he going to go through with it? It's a very smart way to do that. And it's almost like the room is so barren and there's not much there that can help anyone or hurt anyone in a way that everything has to have importance. So I think it was almost by necessity, the fact that everything here has to be usable. Everything, it's like a video game. It's kind of, everything has to have a purpose and, it's got to be clickable or something like that. So the way they went about it was very smart, I will say. The escape room logic is a good way of describing it because they need every piece of the puzzle here because there's not many pieces, honestly, to put together.
But we've all seen films like this, right? Where they're just so casual or like so not, I don't want to go as far to say thoughtless, but not as intentional as they could be with the way that they use this set. I was struck with this, just how many different ways they were able to like dip back into the various objects in the room, which, we talk about this as being a really funny film. And we talk about this as being a talented film. The visuals are great and the performances are great, but it takes what could be on paper a pretty boring story, and by allowing there to be a lot more, again, to your point earlier, Matt, like a lot less about two talking heads and a lot more about engaging and interacting with the objects around them, it makes it a lot more fun. Like I knew I was into this movie after that opening shot, but there were so many times where I'm like, oh, that's better than I thought it could be, which sounds like an insult, but isn't. Every time they did something, I was like, oh, that's better than I thought it was going to be.
Because I think we're just trained to think that. Like this thing, we're all trained to expect a certain level of quality from a film of this nature. Again, because it's easy to do, minimal characters, minimal location work. It's a safe route for most starting out filmmakers. So I think when someone knocks it out of the park, it's that much more noticeable.
Yeah, I think it's also just been done so well so many times already. I kept seeing this film being described in like the synopsis at Fantastic Fest and in reviews and articles online that I'd seen about the film. I kept seeing it being referred to as like a neo-noir from the 80s. And honestly, when I was watching it, I felt more like it was a Western. I kept thinking of Rio Bravo and almost like like a reverse Rio Bravo. Instead of a guy inside that people are trying to bring out, it's a guy stuck in a jail that's trying to get out. And I thought that was such an interesting way to handle the film too, because if you notice, like speaking of production design and camera movements, there's that fluid tracking shot when they go through the bars of the window out into the street and up into the sky and have a bird's eye view looking down. And it not only shows like how isolated that character is in that moment. He's completely without hope because he's stuck in this jail and there's this man in there that wants to kill him and there's nobody around that will help him or believe him. Because also, keep in mind that he's a recovering alcoholic, so nobody has any, faith in him or what he has to say anyway. But it was a shot that made me think of a shot in High Noon where they go bird's eye view into the sky, showing how isolated this character is, this lone good man surrounded by all these bad guys that are coming to get him, and nobody in the town will help him. And if I want to take it one step further and be that person, I would say that makes so much sense on so many levels because, one, High Noon is the first Western that really played with the rules and changed things up as to what a Western could be. And it made John Wayne so angry that he made Rio Bravo to say, no, this is how Westerns are. This is how they're supposed to be. And then we've got Talal in the jail, who was a very John McClane character, a la Die Hard, right? He's got the hero, wrong place, wrong time. Now he's got to deal with the bad guys. Well, in Die Hard, Hans Gruber keeps calling him cowboy, and at one point says, you're like a real John Wayne. And he's like, no, it's Gary Cooper. Gary Cooper is the star of High Noon. John Wayne is the star of Rio Bravo.
I feel like I just got like Black Mirrored. I don't even know what's going on right now. No, and even going further on the cowboy stuff and the Western stuff, it is itself is just a duel of wits. I mean, these are two gunslingers, and their bullets are basically their intelligence, and it's a back and forth, and it's perfect because they each, one person takes a shot, they return fire. And it's just so fun to watch that kind of dynamic play out. And I do think there's absolutely the elements that you were just talking about right there.
I want to wrap in a minute by talking about the release of this film because we've kind of hinted at that a little bit. But Donato, I know you usually have a couple of questions that we don't always have time for, and then we kind of have to tack them on at the end. So I want to give you a chance. Like, what are some of the notes you had that you wanted to talk about here?
I don't really have anything that we haven't mentioned right now.
Ooh, we're doing good.
I mean, okay, so are we allowed to just do a quick, spoiler ending chat?
Let's spoil the shit out of it.
Yeah.
Spoilers prevail.
Spoilers. God damn it. Yes, they will prevail. So if you would like to go into the film clean, turn off the podcast right now and come back later. If not...
And take a shower.
Yeah. Go take a shower. Yeah, clean. Whatever. So the ending... I really like that twist. It is a twist technically, right? Because they do not show the character who is revealed in the ending that ends up being Debon's brother until the third act and into the third act. And I think it's so clever that there's never a single reference to another person being in that room that is already so small. And again, it makes that room feel so much bigger because we think there's two cells. And all you've done is add another cell with another man standing there. And you've just blown the lid on this entire mini universe that is Rattle the Cage. And it's such a simple thing to do. And I was so taken aback by it. So I'm just wondering what your guys' reaction was to that reveal and how that hit you in that way. And if you think it's a strong reveal even.
I like the ending a lot. And I liked it kind of, one, for the obvious reason that it has this nice family parallel between the two characters, right? That everything that Talal's doing, he's doing to try and reunite and then save his wife and his child. And in the very end, we learn that Debon is doing everything that he's doing, one, because he's having fun, and two, because he's trying to, set up this opportunity to save his brother from going to jail and actually being sentenced to death. So all the spoilers, there you go. You got everything that you need. But I think it like you said, it's also interesting from a visual element because it adds to the space, and it also sets up that kind of it breaks the parallel that's been put throughout the whole film. A lot of the shots in the movie are, one of the iconic shots to me is the one where they're on both sets. Both Debon and Talal are on two sets of the bars. Debon has given Talal a knife, and so you see the two of them lined up on either side with the bars intersecting in the middle of the screen. Debon has a gun, Talal has a knife, and it's kind of like, well, are you going to go for it? Are you going to take your shot or not? But it really introduces that the gun again with this third character who has the opportunity to pull the trigger, because it's been the battle of the wills that you've talked about, Matt. Does one of them have the fortitude in order to beat the other one? But then it introduces this X factor, and a lot of what happens at the end is actually taken out of both characters' hands, which is kind of a fun way to resolve these two characters in the fight that they're having.
Yeah, this is a real path of redemption for Talal, and I think even more so than he realizes at the beginning of the movie, because I think at first he's thinking in his mind, well, I've been sober for over a year, so now I can just come back to my wife and my child and they should just accept me and we should move on as a family. And that's not really taking their feelings into account. It's almost a selfish need because it's just him saying, well, of course they should come back to me. This is what I want. This is what I deserve. Not thinking about the damage that's already been inflicted and the fact that his wife has moved on. But it's not until the moment when his wife comes into the jail and he fibs to her about why he called her that he's really starting to act in her best interests. And it's almost because of this evil man being a catalyst that he was finally able to take that final step and be the man that his wife knew he could be. So it's a really interesting arc for his character, especially because he does not physically go very far, but intellectually and emotionally, I think he makes such a grand leap from where he was at the beginning to where he is at the end.
So here's one of my other random questions. So still playing in that third act, and especially in the finale, what was your reaction when the child Shabab comes into the scene? Because I will admit, I had a beat where I'm like, all right, wait, are we really going to throw him in the middle of this now? Like, we've gotten to the final conclusion. We've gotten to the end of the film. We know it's about to wrap up and climax. And I don't know if it was 100% necessary, because my first thought is, like, what the hell is this kid even doing here? Like, come on. Like, I know the wife brought the kid. That was one of the techniques that Debon uses to keep Talal in line, having the wife there and just being like, you better behave, otherwise the wife is going to get it. But I thought putting Shabab, the child, in there at the end was a little bit of overkill and like something that we could have wrapped this up, just having it be about the adults themselves. But as you said, it is also a path to redemption. So it does give Talal the chance to prove to his family that he has learned in his own way. But yeah, again, I'm wondering what you guys, what your reaction was when little Shabab runs into the scene. You go, kid, get the fuck out. No, don't.
Yeah, I was definitely very afraid for him, but I do think it plays into that character arc, especially because I think it happens once or twice earlier in the film where Talal wakes up either from sleeping or from being knocked out by Tavan, and he has these moments, these very like Terrence Malick-y images of his wife and son. And at first, like the first time I saw it, I remember like assuming initially that they had died and that he was remembering them because that's what Terrence Malick would have done. But it's, the dead wife and the memories and the all white linen and things are flowing in the breeze. And she's saying, I love you. But yeah, it turns out that it was more of a foreshadowing to his fate and the last thing that he was going to see. And like now he's, if you want to take it a step further and talk about the religious symbolism of it, perhaps, maybe he's finally earned his way into whatever kingdom he believes in because he's finally completed his path and become a real, dependable, good-natured, good-hearted man.
I will say my thought on the child is it's funny to me because it's one of those things where you think about it from an audience perspective or a writer perspective, right? The whole film, we've been talking about the child and the wife, and we see the wife, but we don't see the child. So if we're going to have this amazing catharsis that Kalyn so accurately describes, from an audience perspective, like, oh, you got to see the kid, right? Like, you got to see both of them. You got to have that reunion at the very end. You're like, yeah, we got to put that in. On the other hand, like, I get that. But at the same time, if you're working to make sure that you're making the implicit explicit for the sake of your audience, you also killed her fiance and like threw him in the bathroom. And the movie ends with her new fiance like dead, and she's like, I love you. And I'm like, I have questions. And that's I guess that's fine, but it's funny where they go out of their way to make sure you get this on-screen resolution that you're looking for and leave what to me would be a more traumatizing moment of not resolution off screen so that you don't have to deal with it. I appreciate why they did it, but I really wanted that. I wanted a credit sequence where they have to open the bathroom door because I'm apparently just a mean person.
No, I agree. I mean, 100%. Her life is irreconcilably fucked. And they
forever.
do. Yeah.
Fucked forever.
Forever. She's just lost both men in her life that she has loved and still loved. And they just don't address it. You only get it from the one side. I agree. That stuck in my mind, too. It's like, what about those bodies in the bathroom over there? We're just not going to address that. We're just going to end the movie now. Okay, cool. Got it.
Yeah. Well, it's his first movie, and it's the first genre movie to come out of the area. So there's things that there's gonna be some hiccups. They're gonna have to work some things out.
Can't all be perfect on the first
I'm
try.
not saying it's the wrong choice. It's not the wrong choice for this movie, but I mean, I felt something missing there at the end. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I do think that's something they just kind of chose to omit to give you the happy ending, and that is something that I think a lot of older horror films might be guilty of from time to time. They just choose to focus on the one person that survived, and oh well, she's so lucky. Yeah, but all of her friends are dead now, and so maybe she's not going to recover that well.
And even just in horror movies that we have seen that have done this exact same thing, where like the wife shows up with the new boy, or like a girl shows up with a new boyfriend, and the new boyfriend is like the first one to die, and she ends up back with her ex-boyfriend, and like we're supposed to be like, oh, everything's fine now, but like boyfriend number 2 over there is like has been a corpse for 40 minutes. Like that's not okay. Like
it's an extremely traumatic experience to like find a dead body, let alone a person that you love.
yeah. I mean, to the film's credit, she doesn't know at this point.
Yeah.
Because that's obviously where I'm going, like, or at least where I'm rationalizing it.
Yeah.
She hasn't opened that door. She doesn't know what is behind door number 1, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it is not a prize that she wants to take home.
And it's Talal's story. It's like his journey. So I guess you could argue that it's more about his arc and less about the people around him.
Poor.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I will say that, what makes you grow up to be somebody like Devon? I don't know, maybe watching your father bleed out in front of you after he set somebody else on fire. I'm just saying, caught in a vicious cycle right now. That little kid is going to grow up to torment some other guy in some other jail cell. There's no getting away from it.
I would also like to point out that I was very amused by Devon's brother flinging the gun on the ground and running away. It was very Humphrey Bogart in Big Sleep, just touching all of the evidence in the room. And like there's a dead body right there, and he's touching the murder weapon and picking up glasses and moving things around. And you're like, no, man, just get out of there. The cops are coming.
Just go.
They might be out of cops, honestly.
Well, that's actually true. Yeah, they are in the middle of nowhere, and well, they've got Ada or whatever Miss Piggy's name was.
Well, she wanted to be a graphic designer, right?
This
She
is
wanted
true.
to work in IT. So
She did print out one damn hell of a bathroom sign.
the funny thing is I've seen a lot of stuff on Etsy that suggests that would go for a lot of money.
Interesting.
It's like what's the word? Retro printer art is a thing.
And that's why this world is terrible.
Last question for both of you. In our Rattle the Cage podcast, sometimes we ask, does this movie deserve to be forgotten? Blah, blah, blah. I think we all agree that this is fun and we need to keep it. So let me ask the better question. Why do you think this movie failed to, A, get as many reviews as it should have in order to meet our incredibly low barrier? It's not like we're not making it hard for folks here. 5 reviews isn't a ton of reviews. Why do you think it didn't get reviewed enough? Why do you think it didn't resonate enough? And what makes it, do you think, something that's been a bit forgotten by genre fans in particular?
I think partially some people are put off by foreign films. Some people still are not willing to watch a movie that has subtitles. I mean, there's a reason why Bong Joon-ho mentioned in his Golden Globe speech that once you get over the 1-inch tall barrier of subtitles, the world of cinema will open up to you, because there's so many people that are still not wanting to sit through these really great films. They're missing out on so many great films by not engaging in foreign films. And also, I think, sadly, possibly because this is a movie that comes out of the Middle East and people are quick to stereotype and quick to make assumptions about something that might be violent coming from a place that they don't know a lot about, but they've made assumptions. They've had friends that have made assumptions and have just accepted a certain stereotype for a certain area of the world that we should learn more about before we make certain judgments, which I think is a big theme in this movie, is not judging a book by its cover. You know, the fact that the good guy is behind bars and the bad guy has the uniform on, I think is a huge lesson that you can take away from this movie, and learning to dig deeper into a circumstance before you make, knee-jerk reactions. And if more people would seek this out, that would make me very happy. It's on Netflix right now. It's very easy to watch, and I would highly recommend it.
So here's...
And I have nothing to add to that.
You're like, and close. I mean, I have nothing to add to it, but to put my 2 cents on...
I'm going to keep talking anyways. Oh,
because
yeah!
I love talking into microphones. Looking at the Rotten Tomatoes page, it has 1 review. The only review actually came from the United Arab Emirates, so it was even an international review. No one in America posted one, which is the thing I always bring up. It's Fantastic Fest, and I mean, we know the people at Fantastic Fest. We know all of us, and we know how many people write these reviews about films they see there. And this wasn't even a situation where it was like 2007 or like 2008, where, yeah, the genre community wasn't represented well on Rotten Tomatoes. So there was that lack of representation from our circles. But I mean, if we're still talking about a film that was, let's say it played there in 2015, it's only 5 years ago, I still think I'm shocked that it doesn't have any festival reviews out there. That actually shocks the hell out of me, because using a comparison point that's totally random, but there's a Thai movie called The Pool that played there this year, and it's about a man who gets stuck in an empty Olympic-sized swimming pool with a crocodile. And that has 9 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes and is disqualified from this fucking podcast, and I'm so mad about it because I love it and I have one of those reviews. But to be fair, I was there for Rattle the Cage. I was there the year it played, if it did only play in 2015, and I didn't make an attempt to see it. I didn't review it. I didn't do anything like that. So I guess it's trying to figure out, when these films play, if it was an early morning spot. I didn't go see it. I can tell you that, because my day at Fantastic Fest doesn't start until about 1 o'clock. And it's unfortunately the films that get buzz and that get the right PR and that get us hooked and make us need to see it at a festival versus the ones that unfortunately kind of get forgotten and lost in the shuffle. Because there are a lot of movies at Fantastic Fest and festivals in general. I mean, going to Fantasia or any of these things, it becomes overwhelming. And, unfortunately for a lot of us critics, and we sit there going, well, which do I have to review here? Do I have to review the one that's a first-time effort from the United Arab Emirates? Or do I have to review the one from the director that people know that might or might not be good, but it'll do better traffic? And I hate that that's a thing, because I would love to do everything. And we're all human. We can't. So why did this get forgotten? I think it's a lot of those reasons. And it's a lot of those things of, well, then it doesn't come out of the fest with any reviews, so distributors aren't going to jump all over it. It's an unfortunate cycle, but it's one that we keep finding, and that's the reason why we have this podcast, is because we're so taken aback by this and going, there are so many good movies out there that just don't get the Rotten Tomatoes push, and nobody sees them. So, yeah, I think that's where Rattle the Cage kind of lands there.
Yeah, I would love for this guy to get more attention, because I was lucky enough to attend one of Fantastic Fest's Rolling Road shows when I was there that year. And I happened to be sat, or I guess we could sit where we wanted to, but me and my friend chose a table kind of near the back to watch Karan Kusama's The Invitation outside. And it was this really lovely evening. We had a candlelight dinner. They fed us the same food that they were eating on screen, and Kusama came up and did a Q&A. But they sat us, or I sat at this table near the back with my buddy, and then Majid Al-Ansari actually sat with us, because he just was there by himself, and he just chose that table, and we just started up a conversation. And then I realized who he was, and I was like, oh, I really loved your film. I'm so excited that you're here. And he was such a lovely person, and he was so kind, and we gushed over The Invitation together, and I was just really excited to see where he went from there.
And unfortunately that answer is not much, because looking at his IMDb, he hasn't directed anything, he hasn't written anything, he's just kind of produced, and which is totally fine, obviously. And obviously if he's doing it overseas, it's not Hollywood. They don't have, like we were all saying before, they don't have that infrastructure for their Hollywood down yet. So yeah, it's unfortunate to see he hasn't done anything since then. And I just do laugh because, again, his picture right on the front is him at Fantastic Fest. So it's that was his moment, and he deserves way more moments from that. It's an unfortunate thing.
Well, I'm so glad you guys have this podcast, because hopefully everybody will listen to this episode and everybody will watch this movie, and this guy will explode and be directing Marvel movies.
Absolutely. The resurgence for the Rattle the Cage comeuppance.
Yes.
Yeah, my last thought on that is, based on everything that Kalyn said, based on everything that Matt said, one rule to live by. If you don't have to review anything and you're trying to choose what to watch, go with something that doesn't have distribution. The Netflix releases, the things that are going to be hitting on a certain day and date, you will have an opportunity to see those early. They will do press screenings, or they will hit the platform and you'll be able to watch it. So, missing out on something like Rattle the Cage with the opportunity to share that moment with the director in the room at something like Fantastic Fest, it's probably better than watching another movie, which is fine, maybe even something you enjoyed, but is not we're not talking about it on podcasts 5 years later like we are today. So go see stuff that doesn't already have distribution lined up if you can.
It's not worth the hot take tweet. Your whatever many likes and retweets are not worth skipping out on something like this that you may never see again, because yes, I unfortunately get dragged into the Netflix stuff because I have to write about it, and half the time I sit there going, well, this sucks, I hate this, and I have to sit here and finish this, and there's 10 other titles I could be seeing in this slot. So agreed on that. If you don't have to review something, if you're not on a schedule or a script that is dictated by an editor or something, by all means, please God, see something that you wouldn't normally see, and especially a Fantastic Fest.
Definitely. If you have 3 free hours, just go check out something random.
Do the gamble. Just pick something you don't know. Just look at the titles and go, that sounds crazy.
Invariably, those are the movies I like the best. All right. Kalyn, if people want to follow your work, if they want to see what's going on with you or see, get a heads up when new pieces of yours are being published, what is your social media of choice? What's the best way to follow you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Kalyn Corrigan. Same at Kalyn Corrigan for Instagram. So either way you want to check out my stuff, I post a lot of my articles on Twitter. So hopefully we can be friends.
Matt, how do we learn whatever it is that you're doing when you do whatever you do?
I don't know what I'm doing whenever I'm doing it anyway, so you'll never learn because I haven't learned yet. But if you would like to follow along and see what the hell I am doing, you can follow me at Donatobomb on Letterboxd, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find my writing at places such as Slash Film, Bloody Disgusting. I'm actually going to be part of a new site, or at this point, if this goes up in April, which I assume it will, I'm talking to you in the future or past. I don't know what's going on right now. Time is a flat circle. I have a site called Haw Creek Horror that's coming into fruition now, which is going to be a team of about 4 or 5 of us driving out articles that are basically passion projects at this point that have no rhyme or reason, but just things we want to write about. So I'm particularly excited to see what happens there. And my article from last month at this point is about the Reds. So I'm very, very happy to see that my personal brand is now flourishing just as much as you thought it would.
You can't see it, but I'm shaking my head.
Yeah, Kalyn is shaking her head aggressively.
If we haven't learned anything else over the last few weeks, it's when we're recording this episode, it's a good thing to support independent horror publications or independent film publications as a whole. All right, as for me, you can follow me on Twitter at LabSplice, LABSPLICE. Sometimes I post photos of my dog. I also write, but my analytics say the dog stuff is more interesting to you, so I'll probably throw more of that content out your way. And I just want to say thank you so much, Kalyn, for first of all joining us on the podcast, but really second of all picking a movie that was a lot of fun and one I never, for all the reasons we've discussed, probably would have gotten around to watching on my own. So I sometimes feel like Donato and I just basically run this podcast so that people will force us to watch really good movies we won't make time for, and when it's something like Rattle the Cage, it's succeeding. I know it's working.
Oh, thank you for saying such kind words, and thank you for watching the movie and for having me on. I had so much fun talking about this.
Yay. Happy people.
Donato, take us out every time.
Demon Wind.
There it is.
More head shaking.